What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Political Spectrum podcast. For those of you who don't know, we're a podcast that collects people with different views on the political spectrum and gathers them together to talk news, politics, etc. Today, we have a special edition of the podcast. We're doing interviews with the individual members to find out where they stand politically and also philosophically, morally, etc. Today, we're here with our great man, Charlie. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Charlie. I'm the right-wing guy on the podcast.
Yeah, I guess that basically sums it up. So, you, so you're the right-wing guy on the podcast, okay? So you have some people see your views maybe as the more extreme, although you would argue otherwise. I know because of the recent election. But let's talk about when did you start considering yourself to be on that end of the spectrum? Let's start with that.
Sure. I really moved rightward just a couple of years ago, actually. When I spent some time in Germany, and I saw the effects of the migrant crisis. I saw the effects of multiculturalism. I saw the effects of a sort of an institutionalized cultural self-loathing, and I promised myself that I wouldn't let it happen to my country.
So, explain to yourself a little more of what you saw when you were in Germany, because this has been something that's been downplayed in mainstream media for a very long time, the migrant crisis. So tell us a little bit more about that and your thoughts on the real problems there.
Sure. Well, when I arrived in Germany, 1 week after I got there, right, Angela Merkel made her announcement that anyone who can make it to Germany, please come. We will take you. And already I thought this could be a problem, right? But I wasn't like wholesale against it. I wanted to see what the effects would be. And then these reports started surfacing. Crime, theft, assault. Then Cologne happened. And do you know what happened in Cologne?
No, explain.
Yeah, well, in Cologne there were it was on New Year's.
Oh,
and
yeah, I've heard, but go ahead.
Yeah, basically like the mass sexual assault, rape, just plain old assault. And what we discovered was that it came out very shortly after, and the German media did not report on this. Like it was on places like Breitbart to break the story. Was that the German government was deliberately suppressing the information on this. And it was very strange to me.
Yeah, I mean, what's so surprising about that is, we have like real news here. We have people who are legitimately being hurt by a specific group of people. I believe it was mostly the migrants, right, who were committing these acts. And then
pretty much every report they received was either confirmed migrants or they said it was people of quote unquote southern appearance, which for them means the Middle East and North Africa.
And this underplay of the media not covering this, it really shows just where they stand, like very Islamophobic or whatever, or they're afraid to be labeled as Islamophobic rather.
Yes.
So go ahead.
It's actually it got very personal for me just recently. I remember when I was in Germany, I was in a city called Freiburg im Breisgau, and that is in the southwest corner. It's like the closest major city is Basel, Switzerland. Like it's right there. And Freiburg was in the news recently because a 19-year-old student at the university, like my program was through this university. A 19-year-old student was raped and murdered by an Afghan migrant. And that is the second murder they've had in Freiburg. Freiburg has become sort of like a nexus for migrant crime in the area. And again, there's a German news network called Die Tagesschau. It means the Daily News. And they refused to cover it. They said, "Oh, it's not and their justification was, it's not national news, that's local news.
It's
They
so
think that
ridiculous.
there's a map you can look at, and I encourage all of our listeners to look at. Actually, Paul, I'll send the link to you. Can you put it in the description after this?
Sure,
And
we'll do. Check it down below, guys.
yeah, it's just a map of, it shows all the migrant crime, and Germany is just covered in it, and it has rape, murder, assault, theft, battery, arson, and the map is just covered.
So a lot of people would say that these migrants coming in and this rise of crime, it's a clash of value systems, right? A lot of people would argue that, and I think you would be one of the people to argue that. So
Absolutely.
Explain to the viewer where your value system lies, or where you think the West is, the West in general value system is.
Sure. Well, so a lot of people will say that the West sort of began right with Greece and Rome. They would put that as like the foundations of the West. I disagree. I think like our civilization as we know it, and the values that we hold, that really began in medieval Europe. And we borrowed things from the Greeks and Romans, but like our cultural essence, that comes from medieval Europe. And within that, there are certain inherent things, right? Paul, I'm getting a really bad echo there.
1 second.
Sure, it's fine. And so within that, some unique Western values, I would say, would be the idea of individual liberty, individual freedom, and emphasis on property rights. We're very high trust. That's a fairly unique thing for us. And so I think that is that a fan or something, or?
It's probably just the heater.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I can turn it off.
No, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
It's just a little loud, is all. But the thing about the West is, the West is every culture, right, has a unique set of values that characterize it, and sometimes you can't always articulate those very clearly. But in the West, we're individualistic. We believe in property rights, and we believe in we're a very tolerant people. Our culture is, I mean. And so then you introduce a different element into that, right? A foreign element. And there's nothing wrong with bringing in different people from different places, but you have to make sure they're willing to adopt your value system. And in order to do that, you have to keep the numbers low. Unless you keep the... Go ahead, sorry.
And that's what's been so historical about Western civilization, because throughout its time, I would say it hasn't been too long for Western civilization. Maybe like 800 years, maybe. But through its time, when it has had immigrants come in, most of the time they would adapt, right? And a lot of times they would come from places, I think you would argue, where they would be able to, whether they would have an easier time adopting. What's specific about the ideology of these new individuals coming in that's maybe making them not capable of changing their own value system?
Sure, it's a combination of things. The biggest two I would say would be, one, the cultural values of the places they're coming from, which are typically the Arabic world, and I think quite a few from Eritrea, that kind of area. Somalia is big. These are not places that are accustomed to individual liberty. Now, that doesn't mean that they're inferior. It doesn't mean that they're not like, they just don't deserve individual liberty. It's just not their culture. Being, as right-wing as I am, people often accuse me of being like an absolutist or some kind of like Western supremacist, and I'm not. I want every culture to exist. I want every culture to be able to carry out its own values, but within that culture and without imposing them upon other cultures. That's one reason why I'm so against nation building. But the second aspect of it is that a lot of these people are very, very devout Muslims. Nothing wrong with that, of course. But there are certain strains of Islam, as we discussed in the last podcast, that will not accept secular authority. They view it as their mission to subvert secular authority. And for a lot of people in Europe, I mean, for better or worse, secularism has become a part of the culture there. But now you're starting to see the establishment of, like, say, a parallel society. Like in Britain, they have Sharia courts.
And I know another point of reference here is that it's not even just the migrants that are in these countries, but a lot of the children of already like naturalized Muslims in these countries, like people that have already went through the process and have already considered themselves Westerners. But the children of these people have found, like, some of them have found their homes with this Muslim ideology, this extreme Muslim ideology.
Yeah. And that's a symptom. That's our own fault. The West, this is a unique Western thing. No other culture has this. We are incredibly self-loathing. I saw this at work in Germany where people straight up told me, they said, oh, yes, there are problems with these migrants, but we have to take them in. We have to take them in to atone. Right? We have to atone. They're still trying to atone for World War II, even though none of them were alive. None of them were responsible. And that Germany is the most extreme case, but you see it throughout the West. It's become institutionalized. You can see it now in college courses about, like, deconstructing quote unquote whiteness, whatever that means.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and there are people.
And let's make a segue here, because we were talking a lot about the migrant crisis. But let's talk a little bit about, since we mentioned this whole whiteness thing and Westerners feeling sorry for themselves for some reason.
We don't feel sorry for ourselves. We hate ourselves.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the SJW crowd. So, one thing that we've seen a rise of in the past maybe 2 decades, maybe 3, I think probably 2, we've seen a rise of this thing that you've just described perfectly. Basically, anti-West, people saying to themselves, "I'm sick of being who I am. I want to make." I want to extend that to other people or whatever, but like they're hating on themselves. So talk a little bit about the SJW crowd and what your thoughts on it are.
Sure. SJWs they are simultaneously a symptom and a cause. So they are a symptom of a culture, a civilization that has ceased to value itself. And it has made a virtue of self-flagellation and self-loathing. So if you teach children, here's a prime example. I'm not going to name names here, but there are people close to me, and who are very smart people, but they will say, okay, well, they will say, oh, well, the Crusaders were like ISIS, and so that that was horrible and terrible. And I'm not saying it wasn't. But then you add it with these other things.
And then the irony is that was centuries ago, where this stuff is happening now.
The first crusade was quite literally 900 years ago. And then they'll say, oh, Christopher Columbus, he was a terrible genocidal maniac, and the founders were all slave owners, and it's just weird. These are people who they would probably identify as more conservative, but they spend so much time lambasting the history of the West. And if you teach people that that's a virtue, if you teach them that they are morally obligated to go after their own culture, they will continue to do that because people want to be good. Right. So they will view it as a moral imperative, not just to say, purge any hint of Western chauvinism from themselves, but they will go after it everywhere. They will destroy it wherever they see it. In fact, at UPenn just recently, I think it was at UPenn, a bunch of social justice warriors, basically the new Red Guards, they tore down a picture of Shakespeare because they said it was racist and sexist.
Just what's so ridiculous about this whole thing is that people are essentially attacking themselves and their own history. And what's really surprising is that they're also attacking the accomplishments that they've made throughout society. Because when we look back on things since the Middle Age, since medieval times or whatever, things have gotten, I would say, a lot better for a lot of people. And even if we look back to these slave owners, we've made such progress. But these are the people who paved the way to make that progress. Individual liberty, the founding fathers, and we fought the Civil War over slavery. And these are people that are saying, well, I feel bad because X, Y, and Z, but even though that was embellished in the culture back then, but we grew out of it. So instead, they should respect the fact that we were able to grow out of it, right?
Well, I mean, I'm not a progressive, but I'm actually kind of skeptical of the whole idea of progress. But I mean, you're absolutely right. Yeah, like we've made enormous technological advancements. There were injustices which have been rectified. So I mean, yeah, in that sense, quote unquote progress has been made.
And speaking of progress, I'm sorry, I just want to jump to something because I want to get to the end here. But you're big on traditionalism.
Hey,
before we end here, we're going to give it maybe 5 more minutes. I want you to explain to the viewer, what does that mean, a traditionalist?
Sure. It's a big question, but I'll do what I can. A traditionalist is someone who, well, quite simply, who values tradition, who looks at the individual as having worth, but only really as a part of the whole. My view on it, we disagree on this, I think, because if you take an individual, you remove them from the culture, you remove them from heritage, you remove them from a greater project, what you really have is a very clever ape, because they have no, like, without culture, we have nothing. We have no language, we have no system of values, we have no morals. So for me, culture is essentially everything. And with a traditionalist, what we want to do is preserve the culture. Basically, everything that we do in the public sphere, every piece of art that is created, every book that is written, every argument that is made, every policy that is enacted, it is either generative or degenerative. It either adds to the culture or it takes away from the culture. So and a way that it might degenerate the culture is it examines it, it parcels it, peels it apart. What's what I'm looking for here? It dissects it. That's it. It dissects it and essentially sterilizes it. It sterilizes the culture through excessive examination, because that's the nature of human reason. If we want to, our reason is such that we can make anything seem worthless. We can parse it down to its tiniest parts and pick it apart. It's the power of our brains. It's a great power, but it can be used for horrible things. So my view on it is a traditionalist is someone who wants to not only preserve the culture, but to improve it, to build upon it. Not improve in the objective sense, just improve as in make it grander, add to its luster. That's why I don't characterize myself as a quote-unquote conservative, because I don't want to just preserve.
Is this through the lens of Western culture in general, or just an individualistic American culture?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think because American culture is part of the family of Western cultures, you could say. I think there is a distinctly American culture. I think people will say there isn't. But that's a whole topic. We could go on forever. But essentially, I would say that the reason I don't call myself a quote-unquote conservative is because I don't want to just maintain. I want to go forward. I want to build upon what is and to make better. I think that's what a traditionalist is. It's someone who reveres the culture of their predecessors, of their ancestors, and wants to do what is best for that culture and for that people.
Okay. Well, I think that classified that very well. And, I think think this is a good time to put an end here. And do you have any final words that you want to say that maybe we didn't get a chance to talk about here that you really wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you'll probably hear you guys probably noticed this in this little talk, and you've almost certainly noticed it on the podcast. Um, for me, my emphasis is really on ideas. It's really on the ideas behind specific policy rather than going over each individual policy and each individual aspect and each individual person enacting that individual policy. Because my view on it is if you get your ideas right, the policy will fall into place if through nothing else than trial and error.
You're more of like a big picture kind of guy.
Yes. So I think that's actually an aspect of a traditionalist is we really focus on bigger picture things, like culture and like the future, really.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe. For those of you who didn't know where Charlie stood politically and philosophically and all that, I think you guys now have a better idea where he's coming from. Please expect to have another video from Frank and Danny and maybe even myself. Who knows? Yeah, probably myself too. So again, if you enjoyed, please like, comment, and subscribe. Charlie, final words?
Omnia pro patria.
Fair enough. Peace.
See ya.